Chapter 29. In nursing education, we study a model for achieving and maintaining health and well-being called Te Whare Tapa Wha, which translated from Māori means a four-sided house. This is an holistic tool devised by the eminent Māori psychiatrist and academic Sir Mason Dury. He describes the human being as existing of four interconnected dimensions or cornerstones, which he likens to the pillars of a house. Good health is achieved through maintaining a balance of each of these aspects of ourselves. The four dimensions or cornerstones identified by Dury are our physical being, te taha tinana, our mind, te taha hinenaro, our social, te taha whānau, and our spiritual dimensions, te taha wairua. This model is a very useful recovery tool. It enables us to look at each of these cornerstones to help us identify areas in our lives where we are strongest and areas where we may be lacking and out of balance. If one cornerstone is weak, it affects the strength of the others as they're all interdependent. There is also some overlap, as sometimes a factor influences more than one cornerstone, but I shall try to keep it simple. Let's break the theory down and give it a practical application. Te taha tinana, the physical dimension. The physical dimension of self allows us to focus on factors in our lifestyles that affect or impact upon the well-being of our physical body. When I looked at myself through this lens as a 30-year-old student, it wasn't hard to see that there were areas of my health that I was at best neglecting and at worst harming. I smoked at least 20 a day unfiltered roll-your-own cigarettes, smoked dope in the evenings and weekends, frequently drank to get drunk, and ate a lot of pies. I suffered chronic pain in my neck and head, which I attributed to the stress and sedentary nature of tertiary study, and eating was a low priority. On the subject of food, it interests me that there seemed to be a correlation between my weight and my level of sanity. I weighed only about 40 kilograms when I returned from the manic Auckland trip, and my subsequent gradual weight gain seemed to have some relationship to the return of mental stability. I've discussed this issue with other people who've been anorexic or lost weight through mania and conclude that once a certain line is crossed, insanity is perpetuated by low body weight. Being in a state of semi-starvation, even though I didn't realise I was, as the hunger signals had long since departed, appears to compound psychological instability, rapid mood swings, severe emotional highs and lows including tantrums, irrationality and unpredictability, neurological tricks such as visual disturbances, all appear accentuated in the presence of drastic weight reduction and seesawing blood sugar levels. I believe that putting on some weight and learning how to eat regularly again helped to stabilise me and stalled some of those biophysical responses to hunger. Living as we do in the post-feminist age of the next top model syndrome, though, may make this an unpalatable observation. Excuse the pun. Despite my enthusiasm at Whenua Iti the year before, I slipped easily back into the Polytech routine of being too busy to make time for exercise, except for mad dashes to get to class on time. And the prospect of exercise can be daunting for people on psychiatric medication. The medicines produce feelings of lethargy, amotivation, and lead to weight gain. The longer I was on lithium, the harder it became to exercise. Lithium made me feel like I was walking around in concrete shoes. The following few years were about focusing not on my health but on my nursing studies during the day and on the maintenance of my cannabis addiction in the evenings and weekends. I had to work hard to fit it all in. A double life requires a lot of managing. In the weekends, Andrew and I often visited friends who lived in the country. Andrew didn't smoke dope, but the rest of us would get stoned and play hacky sack, which is a game involving standing around and kicking to each other a little ball filled with beans. Hacky sack is quite possibly the most singularly boring form of exercise ever invented, and that was the sum total of my exercise routine, that and lifting my arm to light my cigarettes. Being young buffered me from the full health consequences of this lifestyle, but inevitably living this way does catch up with a person. I started to get headaches, monstrous last all day headaches, leave you feeling like you've been hit in the head with a plank headaches. I don't know what caused them. It could have been any one of the unhealthy and stressful pursuits I was engaged in. The only thing I knew was that smoking dope made them worse. Once more it hit me that I couldn't stop using drugs even if I wanted to. I would have a joint or a few maintenance tokes on the pipe, sit back and feel the muscles in my scalp start to contract and the pressure rising in my head. So I would take a couple of paracetamol and go to bed and sleep off the stone and the headache. And then when I was straight again, I would have another smoke and the whole scenario would play out again. It was like in between smokes, or whenever I was feeling better, I would just forget that the dope was accentuating the pain. So complete was my denial around my drug use, I would do the same thing over and over again, always expecting a different result and never getting one. In hindsight, I think that I was actually developing a physical allergy to cannabis. My body was so full of it that it was going reject, reject, but I had no resistance. I've heard it said that an addict finds recovery when the pain of staying the same becomes stronger than the pain of making a change, and staying the same was really starting to hurt. Cannabis is a greedy substance. Its active chemicals like to get all over the neurons and synapses in your brain, not just the selected ones that much modern psychiatric medicine adheres itself to. For example, many of the antidepressants available today work on increasing the reuptake of the neurotransmitter serotonin by the associated neurons. Serotonin, related to depression and mood stability, and its companion dopamine, which relates to schizophrenia, psychosis and mania, are both active in the regulation of moods and are targeted for effect by psychiatric medications. Cannabis, like the older style medications, isn't fussy. Its active chemicals, the cannabinoids tetrahydrocannabinol or THC and cannabidiol, are fat-soluble substances that stick to the brain's neurons. Being fat-soluble means that these chemicals will hang around a lot longer in the brain than if they were water-soluble, for example, as with alcohol and psychiatric medication. The neurons that the cannabinoids are latching onto are the same ones that the psychiatric medications are trying to latch onto. Clinical research confirms, and I quote, that absorption and clearance of other substances taken at the same time as marijuana are affected, slowed down, unquote. That is to say, any psychiatric medication the user might be taking. The cannabinoids are also known to inhibit the metabolism of substances processed through the liver and hepatic system. That is mostly all psychiatric medications, with the exception of lithium, which is metabolized through the kidneys. To roughly translate, this all means that if a person on psychiatric medication is also using cannabis on a regular basis, the effectiveness and reliability of the medication will be compromised by the presence of the active cannabis chemicals literally sticking around in the brain. That is why you or your mentally ill family member or friend isn't getting any better, even though they swear they are taking their meds and that the dope is helping them to manage their condition. It's probably not. Throw into the mix the growing awakening to the role cannabis plays in the onset of psychoses and schizophrenia. Whilst it has been difficult to distinguish whether regular cannabis use causes these conditions in itself, or whether it triggers episodes in people who would have had them anyway, there most definitely is a troublesome dynamic between cannabis and mental illness. Using cannabis as part of a medicinal regime is hard to justify in relation to mental illness, although many of us have tried. For one, there is no way of regulating a consistent dose. I remember all too well that sickening, dizzying feeling of being too stoned, having smoked something way too strong, or unsuspectingly smoking dope that had been doctored with other drugs. You feel as though you're being sucked into a hallucinatory vortex and then spat out the other end as you come down. It is not in any way a therapeutic experience, and occurs randomly and unpredictably depending on the dope.